Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us for a very, what we'll say, special edition of the Weekly Trim here on the Rasslin with Redbeard YouTube channel. We've got a big event here today. I want to go ahead and label this as a very awesome experience because we've got an opportunity to talk wrestling with some guys that I'm good friends with who are very much involved in the local scene and who are going to give us a lot of insight today on what they think about in terms of the Carolinas Professional Wrestling Awards standings at this point in the year. We're at a point in the year where I feel like we sort of get to a lull. We're not, on the tip of everybody's tongue, so to speak, when it comes to wrestling and what people are thinking of. We usually pick up a little bit more steam around September, October, but I wanted to make sure that people were aware of us, that people were still thinking about the awards, and I could think of no better way to bring some more attention to some of our talent, to some of the top contenders for our various categories than to do a good old-fashioned podcast with some guys who are in the know. So that all having been said, I want to go ahead and introduce the two guys who are with me on the show here today. We are joined first and foremost by Jamal Talley, who is the man behind the Conversations with the Beard podcast. Jamal, how are you, sir?
I am fantastic and above the ground. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you very much for joining us here today, sir. And
Thanks
also, we have got Heath Mullikin from the Double Dropkick Show, the South Carolina Pro Wrestling Report, and SOS Custom Wrestling Network. Heath, I have to applaud you on your list of credentials there, sir. How are you?
I am doing great, and I need to thank you because it was being on the panel last year that made me kind of want to launch the South Carolina Pro Wrestling Report, and then that led to the network, so I have you to blame for all this extra work I have now. No, I'm saying, hey, thanks for having us, man. This is going to be awesome.
See, that's what happens. You start to give people a hint that you're willing to do something, and then it's like it's in real life where if you do your job well enough, they give you more work. So,
right. Well, speaking of that, I'm in the Facebook group the other day, the Carolinas Professional Wrestling Awards, and you're looking for some more administrators, and I saw that. I'm like, oh yeah, no, I just can't.
See, that's the other thing that I'll go ahead and mention before we go forward. If you want to find out more about the Carolinas Professional Wrestling Awards, since you guys may not know what we're even talking about here, if you're not too familiar with what we do here in the Carolinas, go ahead and look in the description of this podcast. There will be a link to the Facebook group page of the Carolinas Professional Wrestling Awards. We're a group dedicated to celebrating professional wrestling in the Mid-Atlantic region, specifically in the Carolinas. You can find out all about the group and about the awards, our history, the panelists that have been representative of the awards of the past, our past winners, whole 9 yards, all there in the Facebook group page. So Heath had a good lead in there in terms of bringing us back around to what we're talking about here today. But it's like you say, I was looking for a little bit of help there. I still am. Haven't quite narrowed it down to the folks who have responded yet because I'm only looking for 2 at this point in time. But yeah, it's one of these things where this is a labor of love. And occasionally you have people who respond to this in a not so loving manner.
Oh, yes.
Which, you'd think, okay, this is going to be a nice gesture. We're being kind to people. We're recognizing them for what they do. And then you have some folks come around and say, well, you didn't recognize me. What's going on? It is what it is.
Step their game up.
There you go. It is what it is. And, that's part of what we're here to talk about today is those people who have stepped their game up, who have really made some strides in 2018 and continue to develop what I'm going to say is, I really can't think of many areas in the country right now that you hear about, except for, like the really extreme stuff like in the Northeast and in Florida, where things are just always big time. I can't think of an area that has more talent, more talk, and more productivity in terms of just guys who have gotten, and girls will say that too, who have gotten a shot to go to the next level after having been introduced via the Carolinas. Jamal, what's your take on that kind of thing?
I mean, the scene now is as good as it's ever been. And a show like this is more or less us doing our part just to help push that, because there's a lot of eyes that aren't on the South just yet, just because it is the South. So hopefully things like this will help us branch out and get more eyes on what we do have to offer here in the two states.
I agree, and that's one of those things about why I think it's very important that people have begun to take more advantage of online utilities like sharing content via Facebook, YouTube, podcast broadcasting networks, because it seemed like, a couple of years ago, well, more than just a couple of years ago, you had groups like Ring of Honor and PWG and whatnot who were really taking advantage of what was out there. Not so much here, for whatever reason, despite the fact that the Carolinas have been this hotbed of activity. Heath, you've been on the forefront of a lot of this stuff, because I'll give you a lot of credit. You guys have always had a great setup in terms of what you guys were doing with 3 Count pro wrestling, and the multimedia experience that you were doing there in terms of not just filming your shows, but doing commentary, doing live broadcasts, that whole 9 yards there, as you want to call it. What's your take on where we stand here these days?
I think definitely the, WWE, Ring of Honor, Impact Wrestling, they all have their eyes are on this region for sure, maybe more than any other region in the country. All 3 of those companies have, I mean, for lack of a better term, their eyes and ears, they're spies. They have the lines of communication are very open with the Carolinas. And one thing that always frustrated me in wrestling as a fan is you would go to a show and a lot of times the show wasn't even being filmed. And it's like, here are these guys and gals, and they're literally out here putting their hearts, putting their bodies on the line. And it's like a fleeting moment. Like, once this night is over, it'll be forgotten because no one set up a camera and hit record. And so it was a little bit of frustration with that of, man, if these people are going to put so much time and energy into their craft, then there needs to be people who aren't going to get in the ring, who would be terrible if we did, to say, hey, let's put this art out here. Let's add commentary. So that's been fun. And what's been great is working on the network, the SOS network recently, is you had a guy like Boomer Payne who was setting up a camera at these different places. So listen, we have so much content from late 90s, mid 2000s, from promotions that aren't even around, but stuff that was people were going to every week. So I think we're just in a great period. This is a great region, lots of great wrestling, and hopefully we can keep this momentum going.
Yep. You bring up a great point there too, just in terms of collecting content. And, people could say whatever they want to in terms of, okay, well, fans shouldn't record at shows or whatnot. And, that's an argument for a different day entirely. But I will say this, from the standpoint of somebody who has recorded a lot of footage over the past couple of years, my intent in keeping and collecting that stuff was to be something of a curator of it. Because I thought in my mind, look back in the history of professional wrestling. look back at all these matches that, a Ric Flair and a Ricky Steamboat might have had in, say, County Hall in Charleston or wherever in North Carolina that are totally gone to history now because cameras weren't available back then. They are now. So if you've got an opportunity to add this stuff to the collective history of a region like the Mid-Atlantic, there's no reason we shouldn't be doing it. Because at some point in history, guess what? A guy like a Cedric Alexander is going to come along, and you're going to see him go to the moon in terms of where his potential is in a company like WWE. And then someone's going to look back and say, hey, well, he had to come from somewhere. Where did he come from? He came from North and South Carolina and Georgia and the region that we're in right now. So it's important to me to continue to recognize what these guys are doing in a lot of different ways, not only from a video perspective and multimedia content, but also in terms of doing things like the Carolinas Professional Wrestling Awards. And that's what we're here to really get into here today. Like I said, when we were talking here a few moments ago, we've got a number of categories that we are represented by nowadays. We have added a new category that's fresh for this year, and we've got our old mainstays that are still around as well. But we're going to get into talking about each one of these categories. We're going to bring out which contenders we think are the top of the crop right now, and just talk about where we stand at this point in the year in terms of the outlook for the CPWAs in 2018. So we'll get things going here by talking about the Ring Announcer of the Year category. Heath, as a man who has done some ring announcing, I'll throw it to you. Who do you favor right now in that category?
Well, first of all, let me just kind of list some of my personal criteria for these awards. I tried to look at quantity, meaning did people work for multiple promotions? Were they working for promotions that ran regularly? So quantity in number and volume, and then obviously quality. If a guy was ring announcer for 5 promotions 50 times, but was terrible, then obviously that's not going to count for anything. And then this year, I also tried to take people out of the. For me, if people are on TV regularly, I took them out of the running just personally because I was trying to keep it more to the local independent people who hadn't got that shot yet. Does that make any sense?
It does.
It does.
So I'm going to be honest, Ring Announcer of the Year, I tried to come up with a different name. I really did. And I'm pretty sure you guys know the name I'm going to say. He's just the best. He's just great. He works multiple promotions. He is the epitome of professionalism, and it's Brett Wolverton. I tried to come up with another name. I tried to find there's other good ones, but nobody with the quantity, nobody with the quality. So Brett, you're just good. I know there's been talk of making this the Brett Wolverton Award, which would be fine. But he's just great, man. Brett is such a good guy, and definitely deserves all the accolades he's gotten.
Jamal, how about you, sir?
I chose the exact same person. There's nothing else I can say about Brett that Heath hadn't already said, besides the fact that his cookies are superb.
That is one thing we have to point out about Brett. If you're not familiar with Brett Wolverton, you must not be very familiar with professional wrestling in this area, because Brett is everywhere. Brett goes to PWX. He's involved in promotions in the Charlotte area, down here in the low country of South Carolina where I am. He's just all over, and he has the nickname of Bretty Crocker. Not Betty Crocker, Bretty Crocker, because he brings to his gimmick table a fresh batch of chocolate chip cookies, various other brownies and pastries and whatnot, to almost every show he is a part of. So, Brett is the consummate professional in terms of what he does. He's always a real joy to get to speak to whenever he's at an event there. I don't think anybody can speak a bad word about Brett unless they were trying to do something in the environment of like a roast or whatnot, where it's just supposed to happen.
Right.
So we're to a point where this has almost become the Brett Wolverton Memorial Award or whatever you want to call it. But just in looking around the scene, I was trying to think, as you guys were, of some potential other names. One that did come up in my mind is the young man who's working with Palmetto Championship Wrestling these days, Donovan Walker. He's been doing some good work there. The consistent part of what CWF Mid-Atlantic does up in Burlington, one of the consistent parts, I should say, is the presence of a young lady up there who goes by the name CL Party. She's been a member of their roster for a long time, and she's just one of those outward faces that you just sort of connect with their product. You can't, in my mind, not mention Tim Woody Blaze, who also works at AML. He's a good guy. I've had a chance to speak with him a number of times over the years. But still, it's one of those deals where are any of them kind of measuring up to Brett? They're getting close. And I hate to say that at some point we'll have to not necessarily disqualify Brett, although Brett has told me and on other occasions, I think others as well, that he would almost disqualify himself from the award at some point in the future. But, it is what it is. You just have a top-notch individual like that, and he deserves recognition. So, it is.
Now,
what it is.
Who did the ring announcing for the recent Turbo show?
I am not sure who that individual was, to be honest with you. I did not catch his name because I was late in getting to the venue, but I would like to find out.
Because, most of the promotions that I'm familiar with work with, they have kind of a homegrown person that only ring announces for them. And I think there's definitely some, we had Paulie O'Brien in 3 Count, and as last year went on, he just kept getting better and better. Obviously, 3 Count's not running as much this year. There's a young man named Cade Crenshaw for Golden Corner Wrestling who's still in high school. He hosts a nighttime radio show. Really good kid. So there's people like that are still improving and getting in there. So and again, we're just halfway through the year. And so I think there's going to be some promotions running more shows second half of the year. So I'm very interested to see, if another name, rises to the top, maybe.
That's a very important thing to point out, is that we're just, we're halfway through the year. We're not saying, and I hope nobody hears this and starts the old furnace firing up the heat magnet there, saying, "Oh, this is who's going to win. This is who they're going to put the awards on this year." That's not what we're doing. We're totally just talking about where things stand right now. Things could change entirely here within the course of the next 3 to 6 months, and that's the fun of doing a show like this and talking about where we are at this point in time. So going on from there, let's take a look at the Referee of the Year category. Jamal, who did you have as your top contenders right now?
Well, I came down to 2. And my qualifications for the referee ended up being the number of times I've seen him, memorable performances, and whether or not they're constantly being dropped by wrestlers. Because that's one of my pet peeves is like, you see them, there's some people you see, they're getting knocked out.
Right.
But my choices came down to 2 particular talents, Ray Boring and Jared Fritz.
2 quality selections for sure. Heath, how about you, sir?
I have, even as Jamal was talking, I'm sitting here looking at my list and I am adding names, and I'm going to throw a name out there. I know he works multiple promotions. I think he worked the Turbo show, and I'm nominating him for just a completely different reason. And it's a guy by the name of Tyler Storm. Tyler Storm, is a referee for EWF. Probably since late last year, he's been doing the heel ref gimmick. And sometimes that I have seen that done very cheesily in some places. And he has just been able to do the heel ref thing where it's not, he's not doing the same thing every match. he's not doing a slow count every match. Sometimes he does, sometimes he doesn't. But the amount of heat that he is getting now, typically I would say, man, a good ref is somebody, like the guys Jamal mentioned, who you don't even realize are there. But for me, I wanted to mention Tyler because they put him in a spot to be kind of in center stage there, especially kind of in a feud with Big Country. But he's just kept this thing that could have flamed out in a month or two. He's kept it interesting for probably 8 months now, which is pretty impressive.
Very cool. Yeah, that's a name that I've heard mentioned before, but I'll definitely have to keep him in mind going forward, because you always want to have the opportunity to scout out those young talents and keep it, them in mind as you go forward to see their progression. So that's really cool there. I'm glad you brought him up. I'll add another name into the mix because we've already mentioned a couple of the ones that I had on my list. I have been very impressed with the progression of Chris Wiggins in the past couple of months here, because I've had an opportunity to see him not only working somewhat behind the scenes with some promotions, but also really as the, I'll say, head official with Palmetto Championship Wrestling, and has just been doing some great things, both in feuding with someone like Tracer X, where they had a scenario where he wound up costing Tracer the Soda City Championship there at one point in time. But also, if you just look at the drama he's able to add to a match with his emotions and with how he interacts with the talent in the ring there, I think Chris has been doing a really strong job in making the transition. Of course, Chris at one point in time was an in-ring performer, but now he's, I guess you could almost say he still is an in-ring performer, but just in a different aspect, as he is, of course, now one of the top referees in the area. So Chris would be my addition to those lists there. And, here again, I think we're blessed to have a lot of depth when it comes to referees around this part of the world, because you look at those 3 or 4, and there's others that we could have mentioned as well. But here again, a good list there nonetheless. And moving on to Manager of the Year. This one is always something of a hot topic, because we don't always feel like we're going to have enough people to mention in this category to make it a valid category. But at the same time, as things begin to boil down, we realize, hey, there's more people doing this than we realized. So, Heath, who are your top picks for Manager of the Year at this point in time?
Well, I have one name, and this is someone that I was not familiar with until about 2 months ago. And then I've started watching, some of his work from the region, and it's Perry James. He's worked with NAWA for a while. Up until recently, was pretty much managing all the champions. I think at their last show, they lost some titles and their faction kind of had to split up. But he just came into EWF maybe 2.5 months ago, and to see what he's done with Derek Driver. You have Derek Driver, who may have the best look of any wrestler in the Carolinas, has wrestled for a long time, has been on teams with guys who are in WWE now, is a great talent. And then just to add Perry James, whose promos and his personality, it's like, man, here's a guy who's an 8.5 on his own. You add Perry James, he's now like a 15. I mean, I've just been, even, we were at the show last night, and I just kind of stood there against the wall, just like, oh my goodness. And he's just great. And so, Perry James is my pick, even though he often has unkind things to say to me on Twitter, which I'll forgive and forget.
Well, he's accused me a couple of times of slander on there as well. So that's, a result of me being involved a little bit with the NAWA product, but we'll leave that for another time there. Yeah. Jamal, how about you, sir?
Well, I'm pretty sure Heath has been looking at my desktop because my two choices were Perry James and the Tommy Thomas.
There you go.
Just primarily because in this day and age, the art of the manager, like someone like a Cornette back in the day, is almost lost. But then you have somebody like your Perry James or your Tommy Thomas who'll go outside of the ring and they'll make you hate them. They'll find a way for their team to win. But when it comes time for them to get their comeuppance, they take it like a champ.
Right.
Because this becomes like something I was talking to Heath recently. The cool bad guys, like nobody wants to lose anymore. These are two who have honed their crafts to be the best in the area. I will gladly hang my hat on Perry James. I will gladly hang my hat on Tommy Thomas. This is no shots to anyone else, mind you. If you hear this, I love you all. But they are the best right now.
I'm really in agreement with what both of you guys have said. The only thing that I will add, and I've just become a fan of these guys here within the past couple of years of doing these awards, because you pay more attention to these kind of things. Last year, of course, our winner was George South. I think he's still doing some strong work with AML Wrestling and with the Expendables there, even though the Expendables seem to be breaking up nowadays. I'm not quite sure what the future of that faction is going to be there in AML, but you never know. George may have something up his sleeve. Coach Gemini over in CWF with the All-Stars, if you look at him, he's very much a caricature of what a manager could be, but he's over the top in what he presents himself as, with the the gimmicks of always being in somebody's uniform, depending on what day of the week it might be. He's always on somebody's list there. And also, want to point out Jack Bismarck, who is an addition to this list of managers that really, I think, is going to be doing a lot of good things in the near future, because he has that pit bull mentality to where he's not afraid to get in there and spit fire at somebody. Very much a newer model manager, a little bit more akin to Tommy Thomas than Perry James in his presentation, but still, I think those are some good additions in there as well. But Perry James, though, to me, at this point in time, he's got a little bit of an edge above Tommy Thomas at this point. But if you've not watched him, if you're not familiar with him, definitely check him out either at EWF or at NAWA and get a sense of what an old school villainous heel manager can be, because he's top of the crop right now, in my opinion.
Well, I will say you're 100% right on Jack Bismarck, and I will go ahead and prognosticate that if everything continues as they are, Jack Bismarck will still be in strong contention this year, but I would go ahead and put him as the front runner for 2019 Manager of the Year. That guy, such improvement, so good. He gets it. He never takes away from his guys in the ring. He is just the cherry on top, and I'm a big fan.
Yep, he's made a lot of progress here to have been someone who really wasn't involved in the scene at all to now being where he is. So that's going to be our first segment, our first three categories that we'll be talking about. We're going to go ahead and take a brief music break here, and we'll be back to talk about two more categories in the next couple of moments. Appreciate you guys hanging out with us and being a part of the Rasslin with Redbeard YouTube channel here with the weekly trim. We'll be back in a few moments.
Jolene, I'm begging of you, please don't take my man. Jolene, please don't take him just because you can. Jolene, I'm begging of you, please don't take my man. Jolene, please don't take him just because you can. Your beauty is beyond compare, with flaming locks of auburn hair, with iris skin and eyes of emerald green. Your smile is like a breath of spring, and your voice is soft like summer rain, and I cannot compete with you, Jolene. He talks about you in his sleep, there's nothing I can do to keep from crying.
Welcome back, everybody. Appreciate you hanging out with us and joining us for this segment of the weekly trim here on the Rasslin with Redbeard YouTube channel. If you have not already, please do consider subscribing to the channel. Hit that subscribe button, and also that little bell notification icon that's beside the subscribe button. Hit that thing too. That way, if you want to hear when we've got something new, you will find out about it. Hopefully, anyway, you'll find out about it, because sometimes YouTube doesn't quite work the way it's supposed to. So we'll just hope that it does what it's supposed to in this particular regard. So we are back here talking about the top contenders at this midpoint of the year for the Carolinas Professional Wrestling Awards in 2018. We have already talked about Ring Announcer of the Year, Referee of the Year, and Manager of the Year. And now we're going to get into two hotly contested categories. First one we want to talk about is one that I think is going to be probably dominated by one particular event or series of events, but I'm going to throw it out there anyway because it's worth talking about. Jamal, when it comes to Feud of the Year, what's really gotten your attention this year?
Zuka King versus APW.
Very, very nice.
There was another series that I considered, but that has been going on for over a year. And this, Zuka King and his ascension in APW, I feel has been the bigger deal of the as opposed to the other feud that we have going on in the Carolinas right now.
That is one that I had not really considered, but that goes to show that I've not been paying enough attention to action-packed wrestling in Chester. That's a very good point there. Very cool. All right, Heath, how about you, sir?
Well, I had, John Schuyler and Corey Hollis, which won Feud of the Year last year, has to me has been the Feud of the Year. However, Jamal makes a really good point, because Schuyler and Hollis, that feud's over. We're right at halfway through the year, and their feud it's done. So I think the Zuka King versus APW, that's still got legs. And one other one I want to throw out is the Unbookables versus EWF. This year, Bryce Anthony, Boomer Payne, Cruiser Lewis, Mike Madden, Adam Jackson have come together, and they have been running roughshod. They've been jumping people. They've been winning titles, and kind of having kind of knowing the direction of things. I'm very much looking forward to seeing where that goes toward the end of the year. And so I think for me, this category is wide open simply because the Schuyler Hollis thing's done.
That's very true. In looking at it, John and Corey, they had a tremendous feud that is, if you've not seen what they've done, folks, just go find it on YouTube, see the brutality of the matches that they've been involved with. But as my two cohorts here on the show have said, that feud is now over, and we're looking at the broad spectrum of from January to December of 2018 here. So there's plenty of opportunities for a lot of content and a lot of material to still be absorbed out here. And I think Jamal did a great job there in pointing out a feud that has continued to evolve as the years progressed here. And he mentioned that one. And I'm going to mention something else that is very similar, in my opinion, to what he brought up there, and how the evolution of a champion like Zuka King has been brought to the forefront of action-packed wrestling in Chester, South Carolina. I'm going to point out Kevin Ray and his now 300-day plus reign as Soda City champion of Palmetto Championship Wrestling. Kevin is a young man who's developed a lot. He's still got a lot of potential in terms of where he can go. He's being led to the ring as just part of the crew that Jack Bismarck has there in Palmetto Championship Wrestling. But just the fact that he's been in constant contention for this belt, having matches with guys like Tracer X And here most recently, he had a match that went to a 30-minute time limit draw against his trainer, Ethan Case. He's just continued to sort of run roughshod over his competition, but it's a story that has continued to grow, and we're at some point in time going to have him encounter a challenger that he's not going to have such an easy time with. Of course, he didn't have an easy time with Ethan Case there, but it's still going to be one of those things where you see him really get into a meaty feud that develops and evolves. But he's had a lot going on this year, and I think he could be one to really watch in the future, especially if things continue to grow and develop in PCW as they have been. So looking at that, I am looking forward to now talking about what last year was a big, I'll say, arguing point for the awards, and it was because of the fact that for the Rising Star category, we had in excess of a dozen names wind up being finalists. And that's as much my fault as anybody, because in arranging these awards, I try to recognize people, but we have some math that goes into determining how people get recognized, and it just wound up that there was no way of determining a smaller selection sample size than those 14 guys that we wound up having. So, right. Yeah, what we wound up doing was we split Rising Star into two categories. Rising Star is now representative of those talents which have 5 years or less in the business, and we offshoot this category into what we'll talk about in our next segment, which is the Fire of the Carolinas Award. So for now, let's talk about Rising Star. Heath, I'll throw it to you first, sir. Who are some of your top contenders for this award?
I've got 4 names. To my knowledge, all these guys are in that. There's one I may be wrong about. Darius Lockhart. Is he less than 3 years in?
I believe he's probably slightly more.
I think he may be just.
He might be on
barely.
the line.
Yeah.
Well, I wanted to double check with that. I know he's only 22, which that's just not fair for him to be that good at 22. But I'll take that up with him. So my other 3 names. Well, that means I can talk about Darius Lockhart a little bit later on in the show. Spoiler alert. The other 3 names I had, again, for different reasons. First of all, Austin Jordan, a guy who has less than 2 years in, wrestling for multiple promotions, not just in the Carolinas, also in Georgia, starting to get a look. He just was announced about 2 weeks ago or a week ago. Yeah, 2 weeks ago. He'll be competing in the Futures Tournament as part of the Scenic City Invitational in Chattanooga, Tennessee in August, which is a huge opportunity. I also want to say BB Naturally, who earlier this year won the Bunkhouse Brawl in EWF, cashed that in to become the EWF Heavyweight Champion, had a very impressive string of title defenses against a variety of opponents big and small, guys like Ben Wright, Oscard, defended against Derek Driver, and held himself very well, and only just lost the title a few weeks ago. And then the guy that Robert just mentioned, Kevin Ray, who gets better every time I see him in the ring. He continues to gain confidence, and a lot of times, a title will make the wrestler. Kevin Ray, he has made that Soda City Championship. Just the little things he does online, on Facebook, he has made that title mean something. And I've said it in many different forms. That is one of the coolest belts I have ever seen. And Kevin Ray has made that, to me, that's a top title in the Carolinas. So those 3 guys, for different reasons, they've all just really impressed me.
That is a good looking belt, and I will say this as a belt mark. Yeah. I love the design, and I love the fact that you have companies in this area who are now really saying, okay, let's really show people that these belts mean something. And let's not just pull a WCW United States replica title off the shelf somewhere and slap our logo on it and try and convince somebody that's our title. Yeah. Right. So it's good to see, like, not only that belt, you mentioned Austin Jordan there. I know he's carrying around the 3 Count Pro Wrestling Next Level title, which is a cool looking belt as well. So a lot of cool things if you're a fan of belts and belt designs and whatnot to check out these days in this area. Jamal, how about you, sir? Who's your top contenders for Rising Star?
Well, I had about 5 guys, but Heath went ahead and mentioned Austin Jordan, which, I mean, can't say enough good things about Austin Jordan. He's going to go far. But I also threw in Austin Bullock.
Oh, yeah.
Who's a guy, definite diamond in the rough. And to show a little bit of love towards CWF, because I tried to leave them off because they are on a bit of a hiatus right now, we have Cam Carter, Kane Justice, and Cool J.
Very nice. If you're not familiar with Cam Carter, you need to get familiar real quick, because he's going to be, I'd say, the next big thing to come out of this, or at least one of the next big things to come out of this area. A lot of people are very familiar with Ricochet in terms of what he can do in the ring and his athleticism. Cam Carter is not too far from that in terms of how he's able to get around in the ring. He's still got a ways to go and needs some polish here and there, but in terms of being able to do whatever you ask him to physically, Cam Carter is there and he's top notch. Kane Justice, another good name to mention there, a trainee that has come out of the CWF Mid-Atlantic Dojo, done some really good things here in the past, and like you say, it's unfortunate they're on a bit of a hiatus right now, but I do look to them to have a strong second half of the year here once they get a little bit reorganized. A couple other names that I wanted to throw out there in this category, some guys that I've really gotten quite fond of here this year. One that we've talked a lot about, Kevin Ray, but one that we bring up almost synonymously with him is Tie-Dye Sunrise James Johnson. I think that hippie gimmick, when he started doing that, at first I was like, oh, this is him doing Dude Love or whatever. But it's been more than that, because he's been able to really succeed in creating a gimmick that is distinctive to himself. And one of my favorite matches that I've seen this year was him versus Drew Adler, where they had kind of a little showdown between their accoutrements that they bring to the ring with them. Of course, Drew, being the top-tier athlete that he is, he had his pre-workout or whatever it is in his shaker bottle there. And then James comes to the ring with his bag of Doritos and a Mountain Dew. And just, the banter they had between each other during the match really was something else. If you like characters when it comes to wrestling, he's one of the best ones out there right now, in my opinion. And he's not just the character, though, because he's a very talented in-ring grappler as well. So I wanted to bring up his name. 2 others that I'll mention, 3 others that I'll mention here in this context. Devin Cruz, a young man, I think, who will continue to develop physically and who will get maybe a little bit more trim and really be able to highlight his high-flying abilities. A young man who's been making a lot of strides and getting a lot of attention over in eastern North Carolina is a trainee from the High Spots program, Leo Pride. You can see him on the NAWA broadcasts on YouTube. And also, this is a guy who's gotten a lot of attention for the various characters and gimmicks that he's done. But Elijah Proctor or Eli Grizzlewood, whichever one you want to call him there, I think either way, you have a guy who's shown himself to be capable of a lot of things in and outside of the ring. As Elijah Proctor, he has that kind of almost scary, dark, whatever you want to, dark Mason, whatever you want to call it, type presentation going there, where he's delivering those promos in a very startling manner almost. But then on a total opposite end of the spectrum is him as Eli Grizzlewood, who is the 20-year-old with 30 years of experience, as I think I probably butchered his slogan there, but just, an amazing thing to see him in that dichotomy of personalities. going from one to the other. So definitely, an example of the great depth of talent and the upcoming talents that we have in this part of the world. So that's our second segment of the show. We're going to take another break here real quick, and then we're going to come back and talk about a brand new category, one that we've already mentioned, but that we've never really had a chance to break down, and that is the Fire of the Carolinas. Hang out with us, folks. We'll be back in a few moments.
Joins this earth, and quickly he's subdued. Through constant pain, disgrace, the young boy learns their rules. Whipped down, the child grows in. This whipping boy done wrong, deprived of all his thoughts. The young man struggles on and on, he knows. A vow unto his own, that never from this day his will they take away. Shine through what I've shown, never be, never see, won't see what might have been, what I found, what I've known, never shine through what I've shown, never free, never me, so adopt the unforgiven. Their lives to running all of his. He tries to please them all. This bitter man he is. Throughout the life the same. He's battled constantly. This fight he cannot win. A tired man they see no longer cares. The old man then prepares to die regretfully. That old man here is me. Shine through what I've shown, never be, never see, won't see what might have been, what I found, what I've known, never shine through what I've shown, never free, never me, so adopt the unforgiven. Oh, yeah. Shown, never be, never see, won't see what might have been, what I felt, what I've known, never shine through what I've shown, never free, never me, so adopt the unforgiven.
Welcome back, everybody. Appreciate you continuing to hang out with us and to listen in as we are talking here today about the Carolinas Professional Wrestling Awards and where things stand at this particular junction in the year. Of course, we're not anywhere close to where things get decided for the awards. We're just talking about where the leaderboard is right now, so to speak, and some names and personalities that have gotten our attention in looking at who might be a top contender when it does roll down to the point in the year where we're deciding who's going to be the finalists for the Carolinas Professional Wrestling Awards in 2018. We're going to talk now about a brand new category. This, as we mentioned in the previous segment, was a necessary thing. We had to split up the Rising Star category into two components. Rising Star, as we mentioned, is now for those contenders who have been in the business 5 years or less. What we did as an offshoot is to create the Fire of the Carolinas Award, which is not necessarily the Wrestler of the Year, but someone who had a breakout year and who is just almost there in terms of taking that next big step to being a contender for Wrestler of the Year, or to getting that next big opportunity potentially somewhere outside of just the Mid-Atlantic region. So let's go ahead and get into this. I think it's going to be a very interesting discussion to break down here. Heath, where do you stand, sir?
So I've got three names for this. This is three guys who they've all gotten multiple opportunities in the Carolinas. They've all also branched off this year and wrestled outside the Carolinas, some very far outside the Carolinas. First of all, a young man I mentioned for Rising Star, found out he was ineligible, which is good. So I was able to move him to this category, and that is Darius Lockhart, who, again, every time I've seen him in the ring, he continues to improve, branched out this year. Has been, even though they're not in the Carolinas, he's been a mainstay at Viral Pro down in Georgia. He's wrestled for APW, PCW, obviously PWX. He wrestled in different places. Also, this is somebody Jamal mentioned earlier, and that is Zuka King, who I believe is outside of that Rising Star time bracket. And if there was a most improved category, he would be at the top of that list. Just his, I mean, if you'd have said 2 years ago, hey, Zuka King's going to be the head of APW, not just the champion, but like the guy in APW, I'd be like, what? And so he just continues to improve. I believe he wrestled in Wisconsin earlier this year, which is a great opportunity. And then the last name for this is a guy who was kind of out of things for a couple of years and just, man, has exploded back on the scene, and that's Billy Brash. Got to go to the New Japan dojo out in California earlier this year. Has been, whether it's been in tag teaming with Joshua Cutshaw or singles, it is like somebody, I mean, no pun intended. It's like somebody lit a fire under him, and he has just been putting on these fantastic matches while at the same time really finding himself as a character. And I've just really enjoyed seeing Billy Brash, and he's one of those guys where if somebody called me tomorrow and said, hey, Billy Brash got signed, I'm like, oh, well, of course he did, you know?
One thing I'll add to your comments there about Billy Brash, because I had him on my list as well, is that ever since he came back from that New Japan dojo opportunity, which was a huge thing, and I think it did great stuff for him, but ever since he came back from that, I've noticed when you watch his matches, everything now that he's doing has a point in the ring.
Yes.
There are guys who are able to get over doing whatever they think is necessary at any point in time during a match. But then the more you watch somebody like Billy, you start to see how everything really does have a point, and that everything really is starting to become a focal point for him during the matches. It's great to see the progression of him in getting a real sense of what it's like to develop psychology in a wrestling match. And the greats have that ability. And he is really starting to pick up on that. So definitely want to put Billy sort of at the forefront of this. I think Darius is also probably, I'd say, if you want to say 1A and 1B, they probably would be it. But Jamal, how about you, sir? What do you think about this category?
Well, I also had Zuki King because, like we mentioned, this is for breakout performances, more or less. But I also had to throw in Josh Powers because with the launch of PWX Pure, he's had his series of matches with Brody, and Josh Powers. He's been doing this for a minute, and he's always been very dedicated to what he did. But now he's got more eyes on him now with the launch of PWX Pure, as we mentioned. So he's taking full advantage of that run, along with the fact that he does have a Bullet Club, wrong club, Breakfast Club reunion coming up relatively soon. So, this has been a fairly good year for him. So kudos to him on that. You have classless Mason Miles, who, since the rebranding, he's just worked his behind off. And he's doing his job very well. And then we have Mr. Sleaze, who is a guy, he's been around for a minute, but this past year with the work he's gotten to do, go figure, in PWX Pure and his videos series that he had with TJ Boss, for these guys, he's got more eyes on him, and he's done it on his own, which is a huge plus. And his ring work has gotten better over the past couple of years as well. So all of these guys, for me, are the ones who are just like, taking full advantage of all the opportunities this year and making the most of it. And we'll see where these guys are ranking towards the end of the year.
I really like that you threw in classless Mason Miles. He is a guy that I've watched for a long time because I paid attention to a promotion that was in Myrtle Beach called C4W Explosive Wrestling for a number of years. It was not a very good show for the most part, but there were a couple of guys who came out of that training program, and he's one of them, who have really shown themselves to be top performers. One of the other ones that if you follow Beyond Wrestling at all, you've probably heard of Wheeler Utah. He is a young man who has gotten a lot of attention up there in the Northeast because he's going to college up there and continuing to train up there. He's gotten some opportunities with not only Beyond, but also Chikara. So, there were a couple of guys who came out of that dojo who really had some great qualities about themselves. And Mason Miles, as you mentioned, since the rebranding from being classy Mason Miles to now classless Mason Miles, that really has taken hold with him, and it's given him a ton of opportunity to really express, I think, that true personality that exists within his spirit. You guys have taken pretty much all of my thunder when it comes to this list here. There are two names that I'll throw out there, though, just some personal favorites of mine. A guy that I've been a fan of for a couple of years here now, really been a fan of his since he first got my attention in coming over from the Georgia independent scene, that being Drew Adler. I think in terms of the talent that you look at in this area who have that total package that could say, all right, well, we need you to go, have a dark match at Raw here or whatever. And somebody who would be totally ready to fit that mold, he'd be one of them. But not only just that, in terms of being a tremendous athlete in his physique and whatnot, but also, he's a great in-ring performer. He has the gimmick there of being a top-tier athlete and whatnot down pat. Just couldn't speak more highly of him. I also want to throw Big Country's name in there because I think Big Country has gotten a lot of attention both in holding championships for various promotions, but also in showing that a big man can get around in the ring. Brother can move. Yeah. You got to give him credit where credit is due. I know he's been dealing with some health issues here recently, but I'm hoping that he will soon get fully back onto his feet in terms of being able to compete at the high level that he was here earlier in 2018. So I think, we've got a pretty good combination of talent there in what we've discussed. And guys, again, I look at both this and Rising Star, and people always say, well, what's going to happen if some of these guys get signed and whatnot, or if they go somewhere else? I think you look at these two lists, and this is just, these are the top guys, I'll say, in this area who aren't main event wrestlers. This just shows, though, that there's real depth here in the Carolinas.
Yeah. And there are a ton, there are too many promotions to follow in the Carolinas.
Yes.
And there are a lot of promotions that, not intentionally, we're not trying to slide anybody, but there are a lot of these smaller promotions that have really good young talent. And once they're able to move up to maybe an AML, maybe a PWX, maybe like a Battle Zone or an EWF, moving up to be in front of, to have more eyeballs on them. These guys are going to break through, and we're like, man, where did this guy come from? And you're going to find out, they've been working 2 or 3 years, honing their craft and getting better. So yeah, it's such good young talent around.
Yeah, and it's no slight to those smaller promotions. It's just one of those things where, like you say, Heath, there are so many companies operating in little small athletic clubs and festival halls and whatever else, that it's very hard to follow all of them and to just see what each of them has to offer, because I guarantee you in every single one of them there's at least one guy who stands out above the rest, and it would take just somebody noticing them to say, hey, why don't you, come over, try to have a match with us here, or let us work with you for a little bit and see if we can continue to progress things for you. So it's a great example of depth in this area, and just a sign that we're hopefully not going to be digging at the bottom of the barrel anytime soon when it comes to the talent that is available to the promotions in this part of the world. It's a great session here. I think we've got a lot of great talk here so far in the show, and we're going to continue that after this next break. We're going to have our final segment where we will talk about the 3 remaining categories for the Carolinas Professional Wrestling Awards. Appreciate you guys tuning in and hanging out with us. We'll be back in a few moments. Welcome back, folks. We are talking wrestling here today. Man, I love talking some wrestling. And I've got two guys here on the show who love talking wrestling too. And we were having a good old time talking about the Carolinas Professional Wrestling Awards and where things stand at this moment in time as we are just about halfway through 2018. Wanted to get together with some buddies and just, take a look and see where we are. Because here again, this is where we are right now. Things could change in, 2 months, 3 months time, whenever we get ready to really buckle down and start talking about who is going to be up for contention in the Carolinas Professional Wrestling Awards categories for 2018. We are at, we'll say, the top of the mountain here now in terms of the categories that get the most attention, and that is the final three categories. We're going to start off, though, talking about Tag Team of the Year. Now, this was a category that got a lot of attention last year for various reasons, but we'll maybe get into that at some point in time. But want to go ahead and toss it to Heath, and let's get his take on who, or excuse me, I shouldn't say who. We're talking about teams here, but which teams are at the top of the list right now.
We were talking during the break there, and there are typically two tag teams whose names get thrown out. And I said at the very beginning, I'm looking at quantity. How many matches have you had in the Carolinas? How many promotions have you worked for? Have you had any titles? And even though, the Gymnasty Boys and Ugly Ducklings are current title holders in the Carolinas, but if you look at their Carolina resumes, they have really not had a whole lot of matches in the Carolinas. To my knowledge, the Ducklings maybe have worked for 2 promotions. Gymnasty Boys have worked for 2, maybe 3. So for me, that's why they're not on my list. I'm not saying they're not great, but for But I'm saying for what I'm looking for of what have you done in the Carolinas, they're not on my list, and I've been trying to figure out for 4 days how to say that without being without getting hate mail. I don't know if there's a way to do that.
We'll say nice things about you at your funeral.
Thank you. So let me talk about the teams I do want to talk about. First of all, I want to talk about Chris Hamrick and Eric Anton. They won the EWF tag team titles in December. They defended them every 2 weeks and only lost them 2 weeks ago. And they defended them against multiple, various opponents. It wasn't just, I don't even know if they defended them once against, the Sons of Steel, who are another team in there. But they've defended them against veterans. They've defended them against young guys. But again, they've only been in one promotion, but they had a very impressive run in that promotion for the first part of the year. The Extreme Horsemen, Damian Wayne and C.W. Anderson, just won the AML tag team titles from the Heat Seekers just very recently. I also think they work on the coast of North Carolina, and the coast of North Carolina it's like its own little hotbed of wrestling that the three of us are kind of removed from, but they've also been good down there. And then I do want to throw out another team, and I said this a couple of weeks ago. I'm really undecided on tag team. I've been not disappointed with tag team wrestling in the Carolinas. It hasn't been as good as it was last year. Because, like I said, the Ugly Ducklings and Gymnasty Boys haven't wrestled as consistently in the Carolinas. There's been other teams. There's been promotions that haven't even had their tag team titles defended, and we're halfway through the year. There's one team, however, that by the end of July they will have wrestled and maybe won matches in 5 different promotions. They hold titles in one promotion. I don't think this team that I'm going to say is going to surprise anybody, but it's the Sons of Steel. They won their match in 3 count. They won their match in Turbo. They've been winning in EWF. They've got a match at WrestleForce. They won their only match in PCW. They had to pull out of their second booking because of a death in the family. But again, here's a veteran team who they've probably worked more promotions in the Carolinas than anybody else. And so I'm excited for the second half of the year because it's got to be better than the first half of the year. Does that make any sense?
It does.
A ton.
Yeah. And it's unfortunate, but it does seem like there's been a bit of a lack of attention set towards tag team wrestling. And if there is a tag team match on a show, sometimes it seems like it's a randomly thrown together pairing to where you've got two guys who they might be good buddies and whatnot behind the scenes, but this is the first time you've seen them tag in 6, 8, 12 months or whatnot. And that it's kind of unfortunate, but it shows how much talent we have in this area. Unfortunately, it shows how much talent we have in this area who aren't thinking of tag team wrestling when it comes to their opportunity to really make waves in this business. But I will say this in talking about the Sons of Steel, because I've got a couple other names on my list here. I've known Bryce Anthony, who's one half of the Sons of Steel there, probably longer than anybody else who is still at this point involved in the independent professional wrestling scene. He and I met almost 20 years ago. And that not only shows you how old I am, I'll show you how old he is there as well. But just, in seeing his progression from where he was back when I'll bring up, because he's always been a tag team specialist, I'll bring up the fact that he at one point in time was in a tag team called The Last Resort, where it was him and another fella who went by the names of Drake and Gravel. And they had, the whole thing there. It was very much a very timely gimmick in what they were doing, because they came out to the Papa Roach song there and whatnot. And they were just a couple of cool guys to be around. But if you had Bryce as he is now back then, in terms of physically being more put together, in terms of, focusing on gym work, getting stronger, developing his physique and whatnot, he, to me, could have been one of those guys who got noticed by somebody and got an opportunity somewhere, because he has the passion for wrestling, he has the mind for wrestling, and just, has always been an impressive guy to me, but always been a good friend for me as well. So definitely been impressed with the Sons of Steel, and definitely can see the point in them being a very lauded team in terms of the Carolinas right now. Jamal, how about you, sir?
Well, I have the Sons of Steel because they're the Sons of Steel, obviously. But then I have another team who hasn't been teaming as long, but I've been impressed every single time they step to the curtains. And that's the New Country Jacked with Gunnar Miller and Brady Pierce.
You talk about some big men. I'll tell you what.
Yes.
Brady Pierce, he was a guy that I've been following for a long time, because he was one of a couple of dudes who came from the Midlands of South Carolina, trained at the Champions with Attitude dojo that they had around here for a good number of years. You talk about two guys that, in terms of their physique, that you just wouldn't want to encounter if you were, to engage them in a fight or whatnot. Just two big old boys who looked like they could get in there and tear your arm off if they wanted to. They were on my list as well. Country Jacked in that formation. Just crazy to see in terms of the look of those two men as they enter the ringside area. You look back at, classic tag teams who had that similar look and build and who came to the ring meaning business 100% of the time. They are in vein, or they're in the same vein as guys like, the Brainbusters and whatnot, who they were goal-oriented and really didn't care about who was in front of them there. They were going in there to hurt somebody. So definitely would say Country Jack deserves to be mentioned there. I don't think you cannot mention the Dawsons in this regard because they're still kicking what and taking names all over the place as well. A team that I am a big fan of. They're starting to get more and more attention. I think they'll continue to grow as they branch out even more in the Carolinas, are the Beautiful Bald Besties. They are a great duo, classic styling in terms of having the presentation of two guys who look the same in their general appearance, so they can do those heel tactics like ducking out of the ring and here's the other guy. Oh wait, no, that's the other guy. That kind of stuff that you don't see that much anymore, but they can do and do it very well. So I'd like to see them to continue to get more attention here in the Carolinas. And I'm going to echo what my two compadres here have said about the Ugly Ducklings and the Gymnasty Boys. Fellas, we're big fans of you. We just wish we saw you a little bit more here locally. It's just one of those things where we're proud of you and all your successes, but we're going to have to pay attention to the people who are here and who are continuing to make the Carolinas their focal point as we move forward. So let's get on into our next category here, and that is Female Wrestler of the Year. This is usually a short list because, unfortunately, there's just not that much female talent in this area. And that's unfortunate because, to me, women's wrestling is more than just eye candy. You've got a lot of very highly talented women out there who are able to get in the ring and mix it up and do the same things that men are able to. If you need proof of that, you need look no further than the Queens of Combat promotion that runs regularly in North Carolina. But Jamal, what do you think, sir? Who's are our top contenders for Female Wrestler of the Year?
There's only one contender, buddy, and that is Savannah Evans. When you think of women's wrestling in the Carolinas, it's Savannah Evans. Like, bar none. I'm sure there are others, but nobody's made the same impact that she has worked as many promotions as she has. And she even recently at Turbo did an intergender match. So, yeah, she's going to be the winner for me. Everybody can vote differently, but they'll all be wrong.
All right. Well, I'll take that. Heath, what do you think, sir?
Savannah Evans was number one on my list. And let me say this. I just am not as familiar with female wrestling in the Carolinas. So, I mean, I went on and looked at results from different federations, just trying to get names. And you're right, Jamal. Savannah's the only name who really pops up multiple promotions. There's one other name, and I'm just throwing it out there because I want to give her credit for working multiple promotions in the Carolinas, and that's Kyra Hogan. The other name that I had, she disqualified herself because she's on TV now, and that's Sue Young, who Queens of Combat. She's worked for PWX, and just I think she's at that point in her career where there's not going to be a time where she's not on TV for the next 5 to 10 years, no matter who it's with. But yeah, Savannah Evans, she is our girl. I mean, she is. She shows up when she's called. She wrestles guys if she's got to, and she just continues to improve and get better.
Yeah, I think you guys have pretty well hit the nail on the head, but I'm going to throw a bone to someone who is, to my knowledge, the only actual recognized female, other than Queens of Combat. I'm talking about outside of the realm of them because that is a pure female promotion. I'm talking about someone who is recognized as the only women's champion in a otherwise normal sanctioned body, and that is Stormy Lee, who is the women's champion down at Old School Championship Wrestling. Stormy, to me, is a very capable wrestler. She is kind of an old school throwback in her styling and whatnot because she and her companion, we'll call him there, Francisco Shiatsu, make a great duo in their, not only their look and their presentation as being the Italian mobster types, but in how they work together and how they perform as a duo more often than not. Really just does so many great things for her matches, and also his, because she is a constant companion to him as well. But her, in terms of being a wrestler and being representative of the Carolinas and old school championship wrestling as well, I think she does great things. And I think that she, and the fact that OSCW has a women's belt, is proof of the fact that there is a valid market for it in this area. I just, I wish promotions on the whole would sort of give an opportunity to it, because I know there are ladies out there who are able to compete, but for one reason or another, they just aren't on these shows. So we can only hope to continue that progress is made in the future as we go onward and upward here in the future of professional wrestling in the Carolinas.
Well, and I think we're going to see, those two names, Savannah Evans and Stormy Lee, if things lay out the way they've been building, that matchup's coming, and we could see a new OSCW ladies champion in Savannah Evans.
That's very true. The possibility could be there. OSCW, they don't run as many shows per year as a lot of other promotions do, but Man Alive, and I know we're getting off on a tangent in terms of talking about promotions instead of just the talent inhabiting those promotions, but they have grown by leaps and bounds. I moved down to the Midlands of South Carolina back in 2008 and began following them around that point in time. And they were having shows in the back of what was basically a sports bar in, it's kind of the outskirts of Charleston down there. And now they're at the Hanahan Recreation Center, a great building in a fantastic part of Charleston, where they've gone from having to use half of the house, half of the gymnasium, to now where they use the entire gymnasium. It's great to see their progress and great to see what people really working to develop a promotion can do for a group like that. And if you want to see Stormy Lee, you want to see Savannah Evans, that's another promotion where you can see great women's wrestling happening on a regular basis down there in the Low Country. All right, now it's time for the big boy. This is the one that gets everybody going seemingly every year, and that is Wrestler of the Year. Who, man, I had a hard time trying to say these are just the guys that I want to recognize in looking at my list, because there's a lot of great competitors out there, and in trying to narrow down, all right, who qualifies for this, who qualifies for this, and who qualifies for this, by the time I got to Wrestler of the Year, it was like, man, who's almost left that I haven't pointed out previously. So, Jamal, I'll toss it to you first here, sir. Who are your top contenders for Wrestler of the Year?
As of now, as of this recording at 4:22 in the PM, I have only one contender right now.
Oh.
It's based off of their performances all across the Carolinas, and that's Darius Lockhart. He's a guy who's going out there since the beginning of 2018. He has consistently had one of, if not the match of the night in every company that he's been in. He's almost at that point, like with the Carolina Indies, almost where like Dean Malenko was in like 97, where he managed to get number one in the PWF 500 without winning like the major championship. That's where Darius Lockhart is right now.
A Dean Malenko reference. I am in love with you right now, Jamal.
And there's other, like, that's no shots towards like any other talent in the Carolinas, because we have a ton. We still have dudes like Trevor Lee, who is your CWF champion, even though he is technically on TV with Impact Wrestling. We have a ton of other dudes, but right now for me, nobody's performances on a night in, night out basis, strictly in the Carolinas, have touched Darius Lockhart.
And to go along with what you're saying there, I believe this match is available online. I know it's for sure available on the High Spots Network. It might be on YouTube under Darius's YouTube channel. I'm not sure if it is or not. So if you go looking for it and can't find it, don't complain to me, because it's not my fault. But the match that he had here a couple of months ago with Shane Strickland at Rise of a Champion.
Yes, that is very much on his YouTube channel.
thank you. Glad you were able to find that, Jamal. But that match there, those two, I was there in person and I was able to see that match. But you go back and you watch that thing again, and it's just like you can pick out something new every time you see it. Crazy scenario between the two of them. Just great chemistry and such a beautifully brutal contest there as well. If you've not seen it, definitely go out of your way to check out that match because it'll verify everything that Jamal was just saying in terms of what Darius Lockhart is capable of doing in the ring. All right, Heath, what do you think, sir? Who's the top guys in the Carolinas right now?
This is such a strange year because this category, if you look back the last couple of years, there were always 4 or 5 names that were always in the conversation. And this year, again, we're halfway through the year. At this point, we've seen James Drake and Anthony Henry sign with Evolve. So their appearances in the Carolinas has been limited. We've seen a guy like John Schuyler, who's won this award before, who has really been focusing on the feud with Corey Hollis. And so this category is wide open, and everything Jamal just said is 100%. The name that I've got, though, is a guy who's won in other categories. But I've got Ethan Case, and there's really 2 reasons for this. Number one, the matches he's been able to have with a variety of opponents, to have a 30-minute draw with Kevin Ray. He had one of the most brutal matches I've ever seen with Michael Judas, the match with James Drake, the triple threat match with Drake and Henry. He's had these high profile matches. He's always delivered. And then the other thing is we're halfway through the year, and in the big promotion in North Carolina, he is the guy. I mean, he is the face, he is the champion. And then in South Carolina, maybe the number 1 up and coming promotion, Palmetto, he's the face there too. And so the fact that halfway through the year, I mean, he's also been in APW. He was supposed to be at Battle Zone, that the schedule changed, so he wasn't there. So for me, halfway through the year, he's basically been carrying 2 companies. But again, I could argue in this category, I could argue for or against 4 or 5 guys, but that's who I settled on, was Ethan Case. Again, like Jamal said, it's 4/27 on June, whatever day this is, just June 3rd. So,
yeah, I think that's very valid, everything that you said there about Ethan Case, because, when I look at this category, my immediate qualifier, and I know that we've kind of set a precedent in saying, okay, all right, we want to focus on guys who don't necessarily have TV contracts and whatnot. I look then to your main title holders in each company and saying, okay, what type of work have you turned in? What matches of yours have I seen? What can I say about you that I might not be able to say about somebody else, based not only on the fact that you're a champion, but also the fact that you've competed against competitors X, Y, and Z and turned in that type of work. That said, we've talked about Darius and his match with Shane Strickland, and how that match, definitely in my mind, I only have 2 match of the year contenders in my mind right now. That's one of them. The other one involves my main guy for Wrestler of the Year, and that was a match that took place up at CWF Mid-Atlantic for the CWF Mid-Atlantic Championship, and that was where Trevor Lee was challenged by John Schuyler. I think those 2 matches at this point in time probably could be neck and neck in terms of match of the year contenders. But Man Alive, I don't think we've praised John Skyler before in the past because he's been Wrestler of the Year in previous years. He's won Feud of the Year. But I think he continues to show time and time again that there is no reason whatsoever that he should not be performing somewhere where he's getting at least a 5-figure contract associated with it. I don't know what else he can do at this point in time to show some company somewhere, hey, I need to be a part of your roster, because he shows every time he's on an event in this part of the world what type of talent he is, what he's capable of, and it makes me sick to my stomach to see somebody like him, and also other guys like Ethan Case, like Darius Lockhart, not on TV, not making bukus of money, because I know how talented they are. And I just feel like he especially is an example of somebody who, if he had, I'll say, 2 more inches of height, he'd already be there. I hate I hate the notion of someone's height being a deterrent of getting signed, but good Lord, it seems like that's pretty much the only thing you could say at this point in time. I don't know what else it could be, realistically. But to me, he is one of the ones who should definitely be in consideration for Wrestler of the Year. I had a couple of other names in mind, but I think we've got a pretty good core list there, and I'm really interested to see how this continues to evolve over the next couple of months, because as we've said time and time again in this conversation that we've had here this afternoon, we're only halfway through the year. A lot of stuff could, and I'm going to say definitely will change before we get to that October-November period where we really buckle down and start to take a look at who is going to be the finalists for each of these categories. Fellas, I really appreciate your time in looking at this whole situation that we have this year and taking a look at who the top contenders are for the Carolinas Professional Wrestling Awards. I know that we've talked about a lot of various things here on the show here today. I'll throw it first to Jamal here. Do you have any final thoughts as we bring the show to a close?
Wrestlers who are listening to this show, keep doing what you're doing. I, for one, appreciate your work. Fans, the good ones, mind you, keep cheering. Cheer the guys you like, boo the guys you don't like. If you cross over the barricades, you deserve every punch to the face that you get. Play your position, know your place, enjoy the show.
There you go. Good stuff there. Heath, how about you, sir? What are your final thoughts?
I mean, first of all, Robert, thanks for having us on. What an honor and privilege just to talk wrestling. You mentioned labor of love, and that's what it is. And again, wrestlers who are listening to this, it's wide open, guys, and that we're paying attention, and there are people out there watching, and there are people out there pulling for all of you to improve and get better and reach your fullest potential. And I know all 3 of us on here today, we're going to do everything we can, promoting you on Facebook, promoting you on Twitter, talking about you on podcasts, interviewing you, doing commentary. And so just know that your work's not in vain, that there are people paying attention, and there are people very much appreciative of the price you're paying to do what you love. And so, yeah, just keep doing it. And it's wide open. It's wide open. Everybody, listen, you got 6 months. So, make it happen, take some chances. And, this could be a completely different list at the end of the year.
Very much so. As Heath was saying there, we do what we do, us 3 guys and so many other people as well, because we are fans. We do this because we love wrestling. We love the opportunity to go to events, to see the passion in the competitors, and to see the development that each of you guys and gals are going through in developing your talents, developing your abilities. We want you all to succeed. More than that, we want every single show that we go to have a turn-away crowd. I know that myself, I love when I walk into a venue and I have to say, oh my God, where am I going to sit?
Right.
Because you look around and it's like, the stands are full. We want wrestling to be big and successful and a great thing in this area. It definitely looks like it's all on the up and up because, Heath, in talking about the things that you do on the South Carolina Professional Wrestling Report, you get, these numbers in and you see a house of 200, a house of 300, sometimes in excess of 500 on a special occasion there. So people are turning around. They're wanting to see wrestling again. And it's just a great time to continue to celebrate professional wrestling here in the Carolinas. And we definitely are looking forward to seeing what the next 6 months have in store for all of us as fans and as, I'll go ahead and say, potential voters in the Carolinas Professional Wrestling Awards, because we now do have a little bit of fan voting included. And that's one more thing that you can read about as you go out there and visit the Facebook page for the CPWAs. Fellas, before we get out of here, I want to give each of you a moment to plug all your stuff. Let us know where we can find you online, and let us know what you're doing there. Jamal, you're up first, sir. What can we find you out there?
You can find me on Twitter at Convos with Beard. I am on Facebook at facebook.com/Conversations with the Beard. I'm on Instagram. I believe that is Conversations with the Beard. If you Google me, if you Google Conversations with the Beard, you will find it. Coming up, I will be at PWX's Dawn of the New Day. Battlezone Wrestling's Animus is coming on the 23rd, I believe. Heath, you may be able to correct me on that. So I will be there as well. What was that?
Yeah, that's it. I'll be there with you.
Heath will be there. Redbeard might be there. And that's pretty much it for the month. There might be a few other maybe spot shows, but those are the primary ones that I know for a fact I'll be at this month.
Very cool. Heath, you've got, as we mentioned before, a laundry list of things that people can find you associated with. Go ahead and let's get them all in here. Where can we find you online, sir?
So if people go to doubledropkick.com every Monday, I release the South Carolina Pro Wrestling Report. It's most of the promotions in South Carolina, a few in North Carolina and Georgia. And then every Friday, Mark Whitman and I release the Double Dropkick Show. We talk about old wrestling, new wrestling, pop culture, that kind of stuff. And then a brand new thing, it's only about a month old. It's the SOS Custom Wrestling Network. If you're familiar with matter of fact, if you've got a High Spots subscription, you can actually go into the categories. SOS Custom Network is one of those categories. So a lot of our stuff's on High Spots now if you want to watch it there. But SOSCustomNetwork.com. You can sign up, get a 7-day free trial. A lot of these names that we've talked about, we're trying to get. We're working with different promotions in South Carolina. We're doing a lot of original content. Like last night, I recorded. Chris Hamrick had been in a match in Pennsylvania with Nova and another guy where the finish was a guy getting hit with a loaf of bread, and Hamrick he's known it for 20 years as the bread match. And so we sat down and Hamrick told the story as only Chris Hamrick can. And I'm dreading having to edit that episode right now because but I mean, we're trying to do a lot of original content, but it is a lot of matches. We don't post 3-hour shows. We try to post the individual matches because a lot of people don't want to sit down and watch a full show. So it's a free 7-day trial and it's only $4.99 after that. But we're trying to, as Jamal said, this Saturday I'll be at Viral Pro down in Georgia. It's my first time down there. The 16th EWF is going to be having a ladder match for their Mid-Atlantic title, which is going to be great there in Forest City. June 23rd, I'm at Battle Zone, and then June the 30th. So excited. We're going to be down filming this for the network, the Palmetto Classic for Palmetto Championship Wrestling. And just talking with Shane Dorr, this is going to blow people out of the water. I'm really excited to see who they bring in for that. So I love wrestling, man. Can't get enough of it.
I tell you, it's a great time to be a fan, and it's a great time to be involved in doing the kind of things that we do. Again, you can catch links to all of what the fellas were talking about there in the description of this video. So if you want to find all about the Conversations with Beard, all about the SOS Custom Wrestling Network, the Double Dropkick Show, all that fun stuff there, you will find links in the description of this here video. Guys, I appreciate your time. This has been a lot of fun. Really, really do appreciate you giving your thoughts on this topic, and I'm looking forward to seeing where the rest of the year goes. But for now, we're going to get out of here, and we're probably going to go watch some wrestling now, because it's a Sunday afternoon, and there's no better time than now to go tune in to the High Spots Network or WWE Network or whatever your favorite network might be. So all that having been said, we appreciate you tuning in. We appreciate your likes, your comments, your subscriptions. But for now, we'll see you down the road.